a full bulletin of world news. First, though, it's over to Chloe with World Have Your Say. Chloe.
Thanks, Lucy, and welcome to the programme. Two young Frenchmen, two converts to Islam, two fighters for the so-called Islamic State. Their images released in a video showing the beheading of 18 Syrian soldiers and evidence of the murder of the US aid worker Abdul Rahman Kasik earlier this week has started a conversation in France about why so many of their young men and women are joining the ranks of IS. More from France than any other country. Well, we've spoken before on World Have Your Say about the slick social media recruitment used by Islamic State. But why are so many people from one European country attracted to the cause? Well, over the next hour, we'll speak to people in the UK, in the Netherlands, and also in France. And then we'll be joined by young Muslims from London to talk about their own experiences and the disillusionment they've seen amongst other young people. You can connect with us for the whole hour in real time across all social media platforms. The details will be on screen throughout.
People are going to want to know. Let's just say something.
Good to have your company here on World Have Your Say. Well, let me introduce you to our guests who can begin this discussion with us. We're joined by Zubeda Limbada, who is director at Connect Justice, which is a research organisation focusing on cohesion and justice. She is in our Birmingham studio in the UK. Wasim Nasir is France 24's jihadi analyst and joins us now from our Paris studio. But we can also speak to Elsa Ray, who's from the Collective Against Islamophobia and is on Skype in France. Welcome all of you to World Have Your Say. Elsa, first of all, what do you think it is that means that so many young people, men and women from France, are being attracted to go to Syria, to go to Iraq, to fight with Islamic State?
Well, thank you so much for hearing me. First of all, I would like to say that we have to be very careful about the figures before asserting that so many young Muslim people are leaving France to join Syria or Iraq. I think we have to first of all make sure about the methodology that the authorities using to collect and compile those information. And know what type of people they are targeting and which angle do they use to analyze the situation.
But whether we argue over the figures of whether it's 1,000 people or a few hundred, depending on who you believe, the reality is still that many young people are heading that way. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we have to look the situation on another angle. Indeed, instead of only focusing on the repression and the punishment, the French government should have the courage to actually question why those young Muslim people are leaving their country to go to Syria and Iraq to fight with the Islamic State. I believe that the very tense context in France, the very heavy Islamophobia here in France, which is actually the worst country in Europe regarding Islamophobia, can explain why those young Muslim people decide to leave their country to join the rank of the Islamic State.
Well, so let's bring in Wasim. I'm keen for all of you to speak with one another and discuss this. But Wasim, first of all, do you think that that's right? Elsa's got a point there that Islamophobia is really playing a role in this.
I think that it might play a role, but it's not the only thing that's motivating people to go there. Because if we look at the French system, which is a secular system, and we look at the British system, which is a system based on communities, we see that in both countries people are still going there. So I guess that it's a political and social phenomena that we should take as it is. It's not only Islamophobia. People are motivated to go there because they think or they believe that they are building a new political project. And this is why people from all social backgrounds and sometimes or without any Arab or Muslim background are still joining Syria. And the last example is, of course, Maxime Ochar, which we saw in this video, the latest video of the Islamic State. But let me point out one thing. French authorities talked about 2 French people on this video, and me, myself, and a colleague of mine, we said that there is only one French person on these videos, which is Maxime Ochar. We are still doubting that the second person is really French. we made an investigation, and we came out with some conclusion which makes us really doubt regarding his eyes colors, regarding his beard, and regarding the fact that he spoke in Arabic in this famous video. As we know also that Michael Dos Santos doesn't speak this well Arabic and doesn't even speak Arabic with a Syrian accent.
Okay, so you have concerns about his identity, but the principle remains that many young French men and women are heading over to Iraq and Syria. I'm keen to bring in Zubeda into this conversation as well, because I know that you have done some research before with young people going off to fight jihad, not in the situation with Islamic State, but your thoughts on what you've heard so far?
Yeah, I think there's a mixture of reasons as to why people go and fight abroad. So I think there's around 12,000 people who've gone to fight, 3,000 who are Western, and from the UK side, there's around 500 people that the security services suspect have gone to fight. So there's a number of, you know, kind of motivations as to why people go, whether that's to do with identity, belonging, but also one important point, which is a misplaced sense of adventure, a kind of notion that they are fighting for a religious ideal as well. So initially what started off in terms of the motivation about Syria, it has now moved on to a political project for setting up an Islamic State and being part of this adventure. And I think it's also important to point out that where people, where we're getting filtered stories of people wanting to leave, Western young people who have gone out there with the intention of fighting and who want to come back, they're not being allowed to come back, both by the countries in terms of the Western countries who are making it harder for them to come back, but people from the Islamic as well. So they tend to, there's this kind of unevenness in terms of what is now evolving a few years down the line. And in terms of people who went to fight in Bosnia, we've spoke to a few people, for example, previously, and it was a cleaner kind of fight in terms of political, nationalistic ideals, in terms of in Afghanistan, in Bosnia, there was a political reason, whether it was to kick out in Afghanistan, the Soviet Union, the communist. Then they fought, it was, if you look at Bosnia in terms of fighting against the Serb or the Croat, so there's a clean sense of what being Muslim was, whereas if you look at Syria, it's kind of Muslim people are fighting against a Syrian army composed mainly of Muslims.
Let's bring Elsa back in, who's listening intently on Skype. What do you think it is about French society? You've talked about that Islamophobia, and I'm keen for you all to speak to one another. Is it society's problem then?
It is. I think it's definitely a society problem, but it's also a political problem, because we know that here in France, Islamophobia is basically a state Islamophobia, a structural Islamophobia. I mean, as a young Muslim woman and as an activist in the fight against Islamophobia, I can tell you that the majority of Islamophobic incidents that we record are actually occur into the French institution. So we know
Elsa,
that...
I'm going to cut in at this point because we're having a few problems with your connection. Oh, it comes back just as I say that. Your picture was just breaking out. Do carry on, and if we lose your picture again, then we'll bring in Wasim. But carry on, Elsa.
Okay, so as I was saying that, I mean, most of the Islamophobic incidents occur in state institution and public services. So we know that the situation especially for young Muslim men and women, it's very difficult to even study or to access a job, etc. And the tension are very heavy into the French society, especially when it comes to hate speech and demeaning speech toward Muslims in the media. And so it's very difficult for those young Muslim people. And I believe this is not the entire explanation for why they decide to join the Islamic State, but it's one very important explanation that we need to take into account. And therefore the French government must take measures to counter Islamophobia as well.
But Wasim, France isn't the only country that experiences Islamophobia. Muslims in England would probably say, in the UK would probably say, that's an issue here too. But why is it that more French people are going to fight for Islamic State? Is it more than that?
I guess that we should look at numbers in a different way, if I may say so. Because if we look at the proportion of the population of each country and how many youngsters are joining the jihad in the ranks of the Islamic State, it's almost the same all over Europe. And maybe Islamophobia is a factor, but we should imagine that people who join the Islamic State today, in opposition to the period of Al-Qaeda, today people who join the Islamic State, they go with their families and they have somehow, they can build a career, if you may say so, in the ranks of the Islamic State. So they are re-evaluated, they have things to do, they have a political project to build. Is it good or not? That's not the issue. But I guess that people who go there are really motivated, are really convinced with this ideology, and because if they weren't, they wouldn't go with their families. Everybody knows what's happening in Syria and Iraq since like 3-4 years. People are dying every day, so people who go there are really motivated, and I don't think that it's only the frustration about Islamophobia. It's a factor for sure, but I think that we are beyond that. We are really witnessing something at the turning of the century, which could be maybe compared to other movements in history. We saw the communists at the beginning of the last century, and people joined all over from all over Europe the war in Spain. So it's not the same ideology, but the motivation could be compared to the motivation of the youngsters who joined the communist ranks in the beginning of the last century. So I guess we should evaluate this.
Wasim, I want to, forgive me for interrupting, please. I want to pull up a comment to get your reaction to it. Quakhtar Ahmed is a Muslim author who was interviewed on The Guardian newspaper this week. This is what he said. He said, if you are a young person with limited imagination, a limited sense of self, that's the wrong comment. Let me turn around and carry on talking to you. That's the wrong comment we've pulled up there. But it says if you're a young person with a limited imagination, a limited sense of self, and you're uninclined to engage with your neighbours, your friends, and a pluralistic society, then you're very easily seduced and you're like a blank canvas. Let's put that point to Raphael Loger, who is a sociologist at World Religion Watch in France. Raphael, do you think that's a fair point?
Yeah, I think if you want, we really need to understand what are the causes, and in a way, this sentence is very interesting because if you're seriously looking at who are those jihadists, you can see at first that they are very different from the jihadists you could have in the beginning of 2000. For instance, the jihadists that actually were, acting in September 11. Those people in September 11, they were very well educated. They were between their 30s and 40s. They were theologians. Sometimes they had a very strong Islamic education. Now we are facing something completely different that regards our society, but not Islam as a theology. In fact, in a way, we could even say that those jihadists, they are not fundamentalists, strictly speaking. What we have seen in my laboratory, we have seen that there are two kinds of people that are those jihadists, young jihadists that goes to Syria. The first kind but they have a common point. The common point is that they are not Islamically educated. They don't have a theological education, and they are much younger. But there are two kinds of people after the common point. The first kind will be people that are not especially poor. They could have a life, but they are looking for meaning. They are teenagers. They're looking even for thrill, adventure, of being a hero, doing something that will fulfill their lives. And the second kind is what we could call people that are socially frustrated, and they have of course felt racism, Islamophobia, and all that. And it's out of despair and humiliation that they enter into jihad. But those postures would not have been possible if there wasn't what we could call, not only in France, but all over Europe now, but it was more in France, but now it's beginning to spread all over Europe, what we could call a stage setting that is not a stage setting only of Islamophobia, but a kind of European paranoia, a stage setting of European decadence, where Europeans try to find who is the enemy, who is the one who is responsible for this decadence, economic crisis, but not only, also symbolic crisis.
Well, Raphael, do stay with us because I want to pick up on that point. Raphael is saying that the threat of jihadists is coming from a very different source to ones that we have known in the past. So how is that combated? We'll look at the ways governments could perhaps combat that in the next few minutes. So stay with us here on World Have Your Say.
No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something.
Close to 1 million people murdered in the genocide, including members of my family. The population is young and growing rapidly. Kigali is my city.
Once Sweden's Viking heartland, today one of Europe's most sophisticated cities.
It's a part of the lifestyle here to look good and to dress nice.
Stockholm is my city.
For the whole of my life, all this was hidden from the world. But now, Rangoon has been uncovered. Rangoon is my city.
No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something.
Welcome back to World Have Your Say. Let me introduce you to a new guest who is joining us now for our discussion. We're joined by Thomas Celigny, who is a French student studying in Leiden University in the Netherlands. Wasim Nasir, France 24's jihadi analyst, is still with us, as is Raphael Loger, who is a sociologist at World Religion Watch. Thomas, I want you to pick up on the point that Raphael made before the break, that there are two types of people. There are people who are looking for a cause, and there are people who are pretty fed up with their lives and want to change things. Do you think those are the reasons why particularly French young people are going to fight for Islamic State?
Yeah, I think that there are two kinds of people indeed. First, the social aspect of the question is overriding, in my opinion. Maxime Auchard, for example, is from an area of Normandy, you know, it's really rural, which is a bit abandoned by the government. There is no infrastructures, and moreover with the economical crisis, you know, some youngsters can feel, well, my life is meaningless, I want to contribute to a project, a universal project, and to belong to a group. And I think that's exactly the profile. Secondly, I want to underline a key aspect of the question, the way to enroll new jihadists. I was listening just yesterday, Dounia Bouzard. She's a sociologist, a French one, and she said the way to enroll the new jihadists used the codes of video games, for example. And I think it's something really new compared to Al-Qaeda, which was a more hidden network. Well, that's something overriding to understand about that topic. And
so you're talking about the slick connection that Islamic State has with young people. If young people are feeling disillusioned, if they're searching for something, there's a subtlety to Islamic State's recruitment techniques through social media. Are you saying if there's a teenager in their bedroom who's fed up, who's online, they can easily be sucked in?
Yes, indeed. I mean, the social networks is a key tool for them to enroll them. They are fed up with life, that's right, but not only. I mean, there are even some jihadists who are very integrated students for student of law or medicine from the middle class. I think we shouldn't make a general rule about that topic. There are a myriad of profiles, and that is why ISIS is a very significant challenge for all the Western societies, because it's not under control, and it can concern everyone. Many people, many jihadists had been turned in 3 months. In 3 months. I think it's something to take into account.
Let's pull up this comment and get reaction to it. Richard Barrett is a counter-terrorism expert who believes each person has a different motivation for joining Islamic State. One of the attractions of ISIS to people is that they look like a group trying to make the world better, promoting a type of religion and the values associated with it. Wasim, is there a sense of naivety amongst some of these young people who are going out to Iraq and Syria to fight on behalf of so-called Islamic State, that they don't even realise what they're signing up to?
Of course, some of them could have this kind of profile, but I guess it's not only that, because as I said minutes before, people know what's happening in Syria and Iraq today. So to have the motivation to go there, to sometimes go there after making loans in Europe, to take your family with your children, it makes it that these people are really convinced in this political project that they are building, and this is why we cannot say it's only disillusioned people or people who don't know what they're doing. I guess if we say this, we are minimizing the reality of this phenomena, because as it was said, and even I had the chance to speak to engineers, to teachers, some doctors are there, and so everybody is concerned because we are living in a period of political void in the West and in the world as a whole, and people are searching for something else. So, and they might be finding this dream state or this dream new system in the ranks of the Islamic State. So I guess we shouldn't minimize this, and we shouldn't say that they are all crazy or disillusioned or people who don't know what they want. Of course, in their ranks there is people with this profile, there is ex-criminals, but it's not only that. If it was only that, it would be easy to find solutions, I guess.
Okay,
but
well, let's talk
stage.
about those solutions. I'm keen to talk about those solutions. Raphael, let's bring you back in. Wasim's telling us there that there are so many different types of people who are attracted. It's too easy to say it's disillusioned people. It's people who have low intelligence. Actually, it's a whole spectrum of people who are attracted to going to fight for Islamic State. So how can the authorities possibly combat this?
It's very hard to combat this kind of thing for one reason, because there is something that hasn't been said, I think, in this debate. It is that it is a specifically European problem. It's not a problem that you feel in North America, for instance. It's because there is something very specific nowadays in the European societies. We could say what I was talking earlier about stage setting. What I'm saying is there are 4 actors now in European societies. There is the role, the hero that is supposed to defend civilization against decadence, against the enemy, against multiculturalism. There is the European or French betrayed people, the majority of people that feels that they are weakened by immigration, by Islam, etc. And you have, of course, also the figure of the enemy, the ultimate enemy being the Muslim. And you have also the stupid, what we could call the stupid multiculturalist, which will be, who will be in the same time considered as a betrayer. And so on this scene, the enemy, could be on one side is the Muslim, and you could feel bad about it, but on another side, someone that feels Islamophobia could become symmetrically the hero, because he's considered.
Raphael, let me jump in. I want to bring Elsa in. Time is against us. Elsa, what do you think the solution is? What can the authorities do to connect with these disillusioned people?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's only crazy people. At the contrary, I think it's sometimes just people feeling hopeless, and they have no idea about the reality of what is going on.
So what can the authorities do?
Well, I think first of all they should try to understand really the reasons instead of focusing on the repression, which is also important. I understand, but I believe it's very important for us to focus on the reason why those people are.
So you've got to focus on the reasons rather than criminalising these people. Stay with us on World Have Your Say. In the next few minutes, we're going to be joined by some students here in London to talk about their own experiences, but also talk about people who've gone to Iraq and Syria. Do stay with us on World Have Your Say.
say something?